Hello, I'm Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner, and I have the privilege of serving as the Children Advocacy Alliance's Executive Director. Our mission is to bring our time, talent, and resources to improving conditions for Nevada's children in the areas of education, safety, economic well-being, and health. We are committed to being the independent voice for Nevada's children and families. With each podcast, we will look at ways our community can work together to answer a critical call to action, to provide our children with all the resources they need to make a strong start in life. Today, we continue addressing a concerning but important issue: the commercial sexual exploitation of children in Nevada. We are joined again by CAA's Dr. Tara Raines, Brigid Duffy, Director of the Juvenile Division of the Office of Clark County District Attorney, Brittany Hopballe from Signs of Hope, and Makaay Swain from the Embracing Project.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for coming. I'm here with Brigid Duffy, Makaay Swain, and Brittany Hopballe talking about the commercial sexual exploitation of youth and strategies that we can use as a community to improve the life outcomes for these youth and exercise some prevention. As we said before at the beginning of our last episode, some of this content may be sensitive. It is sexual in nature, and yet still we encourage you to please keep listening, as it's very important that we're having these conversations as a community and with our children. How many kids are impacted by this, Brigid?
So I have some statistics from 2021. Currently, as in 2021, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department confirmed 102 victims.
Okay.
There were 398 youth that came through the Child Welfare Agency, not just through law enforcement, but other means. 122 of those did come through a hotline report,
Okay.
which we can talk about how the public can get involved with doing that. 183 of the 398 were identified just being as foster kids through an assessment, an internal assessment. So, and then 93 kids that we've identified in 2021 came from other jurisdictions or were unaccompanied minors, so brought across state or country lines.
So did COVID impact this? Did you see more? Or talk to me about the impact of COVID and kind of the lingering impact.
COVID was difficult.
It moved
and not for
online.
the obvious reasons, but for our office, because we operate a drop-in center, we never even thought the option of shutting down.
Right.
Because I think the kind of narrative around COVID was, you know, people are getting to work from home. Yes, all the terrible things were happening, but all these people got to work from home and we're spending time with each other as a family. We've never done that before. Versus the kids we work with, we're like, I cannot be stuck with these people.
Yeah.
There's abuse in the home. Like, so much unreported abuse happened in those years where kids weren't coming in contact with doctors, with school officials, with anybody. And we had kids who would just show up at our office. We switched at one point to teletherapy for the counseling appointments. You can't do counseling via teletherapy if you don't have anything to... They don't have computers. They didn't have phones. So we turned our office into this weird quarantine base where, you know, we had the laptop set up because they weren't going to be able to access it. And so many bad things were still happening.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation that I had with our staff, because I was like, I'm going to be here no matter what. And they were like, of course we are too, because this is what we, you know, the food insecurity was huge.
Oh, yeah.
So we started dropping food off, and then we had a lot of Lysol. But we started dropping food off because all those resources, and, you know, I think everyone talks about the unemployment and all these people making so much more money. And I'm like, yeah, but we live in Vegas, everyone's working off tips. And do we all report that? I mean, I don't get any tips, but, you know, do we all report that?
Right.
Maybe not. So then when that was factored into their unemployment payments, people were getting like $50. But nobody really talks about those people. It's always the people taking advantage. And then the kids were just kind of left, you know, to themselves. Everyone talked about the issues around them. No one talked to them. We have a lot of kids who live with grandparents. So that's that's a risk to them. But then they had a lot of death as well.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have access to appropriate medical care. They didn't have access to these services. So it was difficult. And then as staff, and I'm sure you saw that too, you're dealing with all of that, and then the kids, and then you just kind of go home, and the traffic was great. I mean, got to work in 15 minutes, but that's because everything was shut.
Yeah.
It was finding these ways around things and, feeling really alone sometimes.
Do you think this was kind of the catalyst to where the traffickers were kind of seeping into our kids through their gaming systems and through their phones,
through everything?
Yes.
And then as our kids were at home isolated and that's all they had,
They're
and then
seeking that connection through the internet. Yes.
Well, and then you had kids who got a Chromebook for the first time ever.
Oh, that's right.
Who had never had access to technology in their home, and now all of a sudden they have a Chromebook. They're a lot smarter than we are. The Guardian thing or whatever it is that the kids know how to get around that because that was created by us. So they did figure out ways, and that you now had kids who had access to technology in their home for the first time. And there was just a lot of things going on, and I think we're seeing some of the ramifications, but not even the brunt of it yet. The maturity level went down.
From that lack of social interaction.
Huge. Because you had kids who weren't in school with each other, handling conflict and doing all that stuff. And now the maturity level they've probably back like 2-3 years for some kids because they just didn't. You had kids go to high school for the first time. You're like, they hadn't been to school for a year. And dealing with that, we've had a lot more kids who have been getting into altercations in school. And there's kids coming in as well with a lot more unreported abuse because they just didn't come in contact with anyone. So that was terrible. And
Well, the interesting thing is that COVID moved everything, like we said, isolated, online-based, virtual. And that's where we talked about the recruiting was happening, but that's also where the trafficking was happening. So what we noticed in getting called out to the scene is that we weren't getting called out to the scene right away. It was after a kiddo was identified through different means because the trafficking was it wasn't out in public. It wasn't on the streets. It wasn't where the public can identify it. It was online kind of going on behind the scenes.
And that was my next question is what should folks be looking for if they have a child in their home or a child in their family who does spend a lot of time online? Like, what should people be asking or searching or checking for to monitor for trafficking, that online piece?
Everything.
Right?
Don't let it happen.
Just don't let them turn on the computer at all. Like,
I know there's
just,
a lot.
just keep it off.
But now you have no option because even their homework is online.
Right.
I know.
Kids have to have access to something. Just making sure you know who they're talking to. I mean, if they're, and that's the thing, these kids, they've got like 10,000 million followers. And I'm like, you don't even know who these people are.
Yeah.
But knowing who they're talking to, going in there, I don't think it's a bad idea to be nosy. I'd be all the way up in there looking and seeing who you're talking to. Because for the most part, the parents are the ones who provide that technology. While you're in my house, I'm going to look at the same way we used to with the home phone. You'd have to call, and then you'd get the other person's parent, and then they're like, "Who are you?" And then we've kind of moved away from that, where I think people are trying to give their kids privacy, but then are we giving them too much to where it's finding that balance, knowing who they're talking to, getting to know their friends. If they don't have any friends, and all they do is, go online, maybe trying to get them engaged in an activity that's in person, helping them find connections, because I find that a lot of kids are really clueless as how to foster connections with people in person. So then they gravitate to online and people are just waiting in the weeds for them. Take them to do an activity. A lot of kids don't even know what they can do around here.
Yeah.
There is stuff.
And also having those conversations like ahead of time, right? Like, you don't know who these people are who are following you on this site. What about this? Just educating them, because a lot of what I've seen is kids just assume what's on the internet now is
true.
reality. And, maybe our age and older, we're like, no. So just really letting them know, like, these people may not even be your age. It may not be a 12-year-old boy you're talking to. It may not be, who you think it is. And talking to them about, a lot of times we're talking about commercial sexual exploitation, but talking about how sextortion can lead to that child sexual exploitation.
You are going to have to define sextortion for me.
Oh, goodness. So pretty much when we're talking about sextortion, a lot of times perpetrators will get on, act like they're a 12-year-old boy. Oh, you're so cute. I like you. Send me a picture. And it just kind of starts that way, where it may start out a very PG picture and then it gets, more and more racier. And then they kind of use that to hold the kid, I guess
now
under
I have
their
this
hostage.
picture.
Yes,
Almost.
hostage.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Like
So
blackmail almost.
yes. So
Okay.
now if you don't do this, I'm going to show your parents, or I'm going to post this to all of your friends on whatever social media page. So those things do happen.
So folks need to be talking to their kids
Right.
about sextortion, like
Right.
explicitly having that conversation. If someone asks you for any, like you are safe if this happens,
Right.
And
creating
even-
that safe
Yes.
space for a child
Yeah.
to be able to talk. And this is really key, because we've had several cases coming through the DA's office where it took one child who had a relationship strong enough with her parents to be able to say, there's this person who is telling me if I don't do X, they're going to do this.
Right.
And because that child was able to communicate to her parents, we uncovered about 50 other victims of that same type of sextortion. So that being able to have that open line of communication with your children is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that when your child tells you something that may be shocking, maybe something you don't approve of or agree with, that you remain calm and not have that over the top reaction, because your child will automatically shut down.
Yeah.
So really just, asking more questions, trying to remain calm if they start disclosing things to you, calling and asking for help from law enforcement officers or child protective services, depending on what the situation is. But really, it's that open line of communication. And I think setting up early a precedence in your home, starting young, that all of your technology devices, whether it be gaming systems or computers, are in a public spot in the home. As soon as you start putting them into an isolated spot, like the bedroom, or a place where the adults don't transverse automatically all day long, I think that starts, allowing that
What's the
darkness.
secrecy?
Yes, the
Right.
secrecy,
Right.
the extreme privacy, I think getting back to something more
The
communal.
isolation, the
Yeah.
And those
loneliness.
safe spaces are incredibly important, not just in your home, but also you have to remember these are children. It doesn't matter how old they look. If they're 17 and 363 days old, that's still a child.
Yes.
And I think what ends up happening, especially in this community, everybody knows who that kid is. Oh, I don't want my kids hanging out with that girl because she's that girl. Instead of framing it like that, then
What's going on?
like, what's really going on? Because as soon as you write these kids off and expel them out of your safe, comfortable community, what are they going to gravitate towards? When they eventually need help and they realize, oh my goodness, I have no way to get out of this, I need help. If they look around and they don't belong in our community anymore, who are they reaching out to? And then you have to wait until they get to one of us, when it should be, if your kids come home and say, oh, that girl's doing those things again, well, why can't that parent be proactive and call the school and say, hey, I think, a social worker needs to talk to this child, there's things going on. And kids know what's going on with each other.
Yes.
Taking advantage of the fact that they are incredibly nosy.
Yeah.
They know everybody's business. They know the kids who are struggling, because that's the gossip.
Yeah.
So when you hear your kids talking about these other children in school, be proactive, because I know if someone noticed something about my child and didn't say something, and now we're 2 years in and they're in therapy at TUP or being identified on the hotline, and all these people knew and could have done something, that's just terrible.
Yeah.
And I think we need a more community feel.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's important in this is we started off this conversation talking about, foster youth and youth who are at higher risk and are most vulnerable for exploitation. But that's not all kids, right? Like any kid could be subjected to this, right? Like predators don't care SES, they don't care race, they don't care age. Like predators are looking for prey. And so I love that you all are empowering parents to not only look in their own homes at what's going on with both female and male identified kids, right? Like this isn't just for people with lady bits. This is everybody. But I think, I think we all I love that you all empowered parents to contact the school and contact social workers, because you're right. Like I remember who that girl was when I was growing up, and I remember, the moms chatting about that girl or that kid or that boy, and not stopping to say, what's going on? Like, how can we support? Like, why is this child sexually active so young, right? Like, what messages, like, what supports are they getting,
I think we all had that kid's house who we weren't allowed to go to. And it's like, but we never questioned it. We were just like, you don't get me. She's my best friend.
Yeah.
But there was like a very strict, you can't hang out with her anymore.
And there was a reason, but
nobody
how
ever
do we
talks
talk about
it.
that reason, right? And how do we empower parents?
And I would even challenge parents and community members, all of us, to really take that next step to not just include those kids, but really be proactive in educating our kids. I don't mean anything extreme, but you yourself knowing what sex trafficking is, you yourself knowing what abuse, assault, those kind of things are, so that you can communicate it with your kids. We had a coworker in the anti-sex trafficking movement who obviously was very involved and had a daughter that grew up into being in high school. And she was, I think, taking her kid home. And at one point in the conversation, the kid and her friends were talking, and the kid, her child, was like, "That's a pimp. You better not write him back," So,
but that's what you want. You want to be like, that's a pimp.
Right.
Shut him down.
Yeah, so that they can do that education amongst themselves. So if you empower them to know that, that's the first step of prevention, right? Is knowing so that you don't get drawn in. So
I remember being on the phone with an advocate when my daughter was like 8 or 9, who had called me. And I didn't think she could hear me in the other room. And she's like, "Mom, what's a sex trafficking victim?" I'm like, oh. Yeah. But then, I was like, this is...
They need to know.
Yeah, and they need to know.
We want to shelter them, but
we were all told, don't follow the puppies into a van. How realistic was that?
But, I mean, there are a lot of... You'd be surprised.
They're still following puppies.
But empowering kids. Because if you don't... All these crimes, it's child abuse.
Yeah.
All crimes of child abuse, they operate on secrecy, because it's not like you just, sometimes you do, but it's not like you just at the grocery store and you see a parent, smack their kid in the face. It happens behind closed doors. We're not leaving marks. We're not.
Right.
Trafficking operates in the same way. Obviously we live in Vegas, so some of it is quite blatant, but a lot of it, the recruiting and all of that stuff, it's for every girl who's contacted, not all of them are going to be lured into trafficking, but the more, that's what's happened with online. You can contact more people all at once. So you extend your chances of reaching someone who is vulnerable, and you look at teens now, self-image, it's not exactly finding a needle in a haystack. It's self-image and self-esteem is so low right now.
Yeah.
It's not difficult to find a teen who has issues.
So predators are casting a wider net. So we all need to be talking to our children about this and in a way that's developmentally appropriate, right? Just like I've got toddlers and they know if we're out and someone tries to take them to scream, "You're not my mommy," and fire, and like, and because they're toddlers, right? And so as they get older, I'll have these conversations with them, but people need to know that if you're talking to your kids about sex, it's important to also talk to them about predators, right? And warning signs and things to look out for.
There's actually a really great place they can call now. All of the community.
Tell us about it.
Yes. So in 2019, the Nevada legislature passed a statute that allowed for child welfare agencies to take calls on any child that is believed to be at risk of sexual exploitation or who is actually being exploited.
So people don't have to prove it. They do not. Just have to suspect it, and they can call this number.
And then the experts on the other end of that line will screen in or out based upon what they hear from the call.
Perfect.
And then move on to an assessment and referrals out to our community partners for services. So we'll make sure that everybody has that hotline number.
That will be put on the screen.
Okay.
And posted as part
Right.
of this podcast?
So we have mandated reporters now. So everybody that used to be a mandated reporter of child abuse and neglect is now a mandated reporter of reasonable cause to believe of sex trafficking.
Perfect.
So that gets our teachers, our doctors, our social workers, therapists, all of that. But the general public can use that number too for the neighbor, child, or anybody.
It's fantastic.
The number is 702-399-0081, and that's Clark County's Child Protective Service hotline. If you are in another jurisdiction and listening to this, you could still call that hotline, and they'll make sure that they route you to the correct jurisdiction.
Okay.
So if you're in
perfect.
Ely or Nye County, they'll make sure that you get to the right number.
Okay, can you say that number one more time, Bridget?
Sure, 702-399-0081.
Okay, 702-399-0081. Okay, thank you. Write that down. Save it in your phone. And I mentioned earlier, talking to kids about this in a way that's developmentally appropriate. I think one of the things that's really important is that when parents are talking to their kids about sex and talking about the bodies, that they're not saying lady bits, right? They are saying vagina. They are saying, butt or anus, and they're talking about breast or nipples, and they're using the anatomically correct terms, right? Just to help kids understand, if something does happen to their body, where it's happening and what's happening. What other types of things, as far as we talked about developmentally appropriate conversations with kids about sex and preparing them for this, like what other types of suggestions would you
Well, you mentioned with your toddlers, you're teaching them stranger danger.
Right.
And, that's maybe about as far as you might go with a toddler. But it's also based on, it's not on an age or a grade. It's really, maybe the questions they're asking, or if they're starting to get more access to the internet, then you want to be talking about that. But just really talking about like boundaries and, interactions and things like that from a young age, and being able to stand up for your own boundaries will eventually, once they get to the appropriate age, whatever age that is, can start to talk about appropriate sexual boundaries and things like that, so that it's something that's just built into their everyday rhythm, that they know about these things, and it's just kind of expands based on their experience and interactions with the world.
Yeah.
And healthy relationships.
Yes.
If you don't model that, how will kids ever know?
Yes.
If you are yelling and screaming or gossiping or secretive all the time and things like that, that's what kids learn. I mean, they're not going necessarily off the words we say, they're going off the feelings, right? Kids will know when there's an angry adult in a room because that's what they have to go off, I think it's important to teach kids what healthy relationships are by displaying it. But if you can't display it, then help them identify what it would look like for them. And it's not just romantic relationships. There is peer recruitment. There are kids who unfortunately recruit other kids and, continue the cycle of exploitation. Looking at that as well, but also making sure that your kids have at least one person who is responsible and reliable, it might not be you. Right. But if it's the one teacher, as long as that is a responsible adult, if it's the one teacher and that they always go to them for issues of, being self-conscious or things like that, then foster that relationship in a healthy way. If it's not you, but it is your sister, because they like to go to auntie, don't be jealous of that. Just be thankful that they have a responsible adult and let them know in the beginning, like, although you're going to your aunt with things, she is going to have to tell me some of the stuff that you talk to me about. It's those healthy relationships and figuring out who they're comfortable with. Because if they're not comfortable with you, it's not your fault. They're teenagers. All teenagers get icky about their parents. But you have to help them identify someone, because if they have no one, someone's going to be looking to be that person. And it's not going to be the aunt or the responsible adult. It's going to be someone who's going to take advantage. So helping them identify whoever that is from a young age too. Letting them know it's okay to talk to people about things. You don't have to keep everything in. I think it's important.
I think there are also a lot of adults with unresolved sexual trauma that need, that could benefit from getting some support, and I think that would support them in being able to have some of these conversations with their kids, right? And so just want to encourage folks to take care of themselves as well, right? So that they can be as whole and as present as possible for their kids.
Well, we see a lot of generational trauma too. There's a lot of this one kid isn't the first one to go through this issue or similar issues that, and even of my age group in 30s, we're still awkward about seeking help and things like that. Now imagine now we're in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, like these were things we didn't talk about. It's in the house, you mind your business, it's our business, not their business, things like that. It has to be shifted because that's the things that we're pushing on our kids. And then they go and they have the same thing. This is what we don't talk about this, or they don't want to look stupid.
Yeah.
They don't want to be the kid who fell in love with the internet person who wasn't real and then did send the pictures and are now being like, that is embarrassing.
Titeo, they just did a thing on it.
They do, like the shame and the embarrassment. Like you don't want to have to tell your parents, hey, look, there's a video of me. How do you bring that up?
Yeah.
But if parents are fostering those safe places, like no matter what you do, I'm your parent and we can figure this out together. That's really important because there's so much shame with this. Because like you said, nobody wants to be that kid.
Yeah. But if you are that kid, it's okay. We can support you, right?
Is. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important.
You're still a kid and things happen. It's never, I think that's something we always talk about in our prevention program. It doesn't matter what stage it's at. It's never too late for you to ask someone for help. It's never too late for you to tell someone that you need something. It doesn't matter how long it's gone on for or how deep you are in there. It's never too late to find someone or for us to help you find someone that can help you. I think that's some kids get to the point where they completely lose hope and they're like, here I am in this life. Like, I'm going to have to go for it because it's all out there. It's never too late to turn the corner and do something else. It's going to be difficult, but it's never too late. I think that's really important.
The Children's Advocacy Center down over at on Child Haven campus.
Yeah.
They have, when we identify a child that we believe is being sexually exploited, they do their forensic interviews there.
Okay.
And then if the child is identified as being exploited, then we have classes and counseling for the parents as well. I'm not sure if your agencies have that. I think I know yours does, right?
We have the parent support group.
There's parent supports. So to know that if there's an adult who's dealing with this in the community, that there are supports out there for people they can reach out to. Safe places where it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be talking about it with their relatives if that's the issue. They don't want to share it with other family members and friends. We do have opportunities for them to find support as well.
I think that's so important, Brigid. And I want to go back to like Kai said, just like with a kid, it can happen. Like as a parent, it can happen, right? And it doesn't mean that you're not a good parent. It doesn't mean that predators are predators, right? And they're looking for those cracks. They're looking for those holes. And it's not an indictment on you as a parent. Like it just is. And so how do you heal and make repair and take care of your family and move forward? And these are fantastic supports, like you said, in the community for doing just that.
And that's what we do as RISE, but also we work with the Embracing Project, that when we're working with a kid, we're not just working with that kid.
Right.
We're working with their support network. And a lot of times we may be working with the kiddo, but you can tell there's something going on with the support network and, talking with them, they may disclose. And that's the great thing about being part of Signs of Hope is that we have support groups for every walk of life. If you've experienced sexual violence, if your kid has, there's a specific parental support group. We have one at the Embracing Project specifically for commercially sexually exploited youth. Their parents can come to that support group as well.
Because it's important. It's a terrible feeling to have all these bad things happen to your child, and whether or not you knew, or it's not like it's within your power to stop it. You can't lock your children away. And then the guilt associated with being a parent is already, even before bad things happen, I feel like parents just feel guilty all the time.
Every day.
And then so it's not on them. And I think sometimes parents feel extra bad because they're like, I should know what to do. No, you shouldn't. Nobody could ever imagine some of the terrible things that happen, that if you're not equipped to deal with this situation, it's not on you. That's why we offer the education, we offer the support, because this is the first, probably, maybe not, but this is probably one of the toughest things you're dealing with. And it's your baby. You know, we have, even though they're big and they're 17, you see the parents, how they look at their kids, and that's their baby. It's always going to be their baby. And it's really, really difficult. And I think they try to go at it like head on and like strong, but it's okay to struggle when your kid is struggling. And it's okay to ask for help. Nobody came with a manual for this kind of situation.
Absolutely.
And just, less guilt, but I know parents already feel guilty for everything.
And we want to get rid of that shame, right? Because because carrying that shame can limit the ability to get help, and we want to get rid of it and get help.
And that does happen too in families where you don't want to be the mom at the family gathering who has the kid who was sexually exploited.
Yeah.
But that's, the family should come together and be like, look at this terrible, let me know what you need. You probably need sleep because you're probably awake all the time trying to listen if the door's opening and things like that. To offer support from wherever you can get it that's safe and responsible, to come together as a community, whether that's your little community of your family or the larger community. Offer people a hand sometimes. It's people are struggling.
So before we wrap up, I want to ask for just a final thought. Like, what is the one thing that you want folks to take from this conversation? And then I'm going to have you repeat how they can get involved and where they can find you all. So who would like to go first? What is the one thing that you feel like folks, like just a sentence or two, maybe a 3-sentence summary?
So Tara, I'll say, in July of 2023, a change is coming to the state of Nevada. And that change is going to be that we can no longer use secure detention as an alternative when law enforcement comes into contact with a child victim. As a child advocate, I applaud that. And I think that is the better way to go.
Absolutely.
But I also hesitate because I don't know that Nevada has put enough supports,
the safeguards to keep
into what we need in order to make sure that these children are protected as they come in. So I believe we need to get away with protecting them by locking them up, and instead go through the service-based protections. But if we can't build up these programs with more volunteers, more advocates, if the state isn't willing to put forth some money to build more housing programs, so that we have a place to take a child whose parents are absent. So what I would want the community to know is we cannot do this alone. We definitely need people that want to support all of the work that we do so that we can feel comfortable in knowing that our children are protected. But it is going to be a big change come July 2023.
Right. So folks need to get on the phone with their legislators and make sure that they are supporting programs that will ease that transition next summer. Right. That's going to be here in 2 seconds.
It is. And it's not just
it's like only gets here, right?
It's not just a Clark County issue. Right. And that's what I keep, I feel like in Clark County, we are putting in, commitments but the rest of the state isn't situated the same. And so we have to look at it as a statewide issue for all our children. And it's not limited to Clark County.
Yeah. It's frightening, Bridget.
So.
Well, I will piggyback on top of the community talk and just really get involved where you feel that you are most effective and passionate within your community. So I always say, yes, we want the volunteers. If somebody wants to donate food, clothing, funding, whatever, to a nonprofit, to, the cause, then that's great. But if your heart is in homelessness work, if your heart is in the community watch, whatever it is, all of those things can lead to the prevention of sex trafficking of children, by being the eyes and the ears, by contributing to anti-homelessness. So if you're working to make sure that people will have their homes, that they do have food in the homes, they have clothing, that's, again, one less vulnerability for that kid in that home for a trafficker to target. So yes, we would love for everybody to come join us and, be the front lines volunteer work, but we know that that's not everybody's thing.
Right.
So get involved in your community where you feel led.
Yeah. We would also like people to get involved. And donating is a fantastic way to do that, but not everybody has the means. I think even the smallest of things that I would like to see, and I know it's some of the feedback that we've gotten from the kids, is just how badly they're treated by people. The looks they get, and keep in mind sometimes it is when they're in an area that they're not supposed to be in, where people are giving them dirty looks, or just, in school not feeling like anyone can see them and things like that. Kindness is very much free. And it doesn't take that much effort. It doesn't take that much time. I think that some of us are so jaded that we just always like, oh God, this person, but you don't know what's happening. You don't know what they're struggling with. Sometimes life just sucks. And I think that those people could use a little bit of extra kindness. We could all use a little extra kindness, and really fostering those communities and making sure that when kids are ready or able to access services, to access help, to speak out, to report on what's happening to them, when they're ready for that, that you still have a place for them in your community. Because if there's nothing for them to go back to, what's the motivation to go back? I'm going to stay where I know I at least have people. So make sure that they have that space and know that when they're ready, they will be welcomed back. They will be embraced back. We can empower them, whatever it takes as a community, just those little things. Smile at the kids at the bus stop, even though they're sitting on your wall. Things like that. At least they're going to school, you know what I mean? Just those little things, it really makes a difference. And it does. We all like to feel like we belong somewhere. I think we need to move more towards becoming a community again. We can get everything delivered, but you can't get people delivered.
We're going to be a community with delivery as well.
We definitely rely on that.
Thank you so much. Before we go, I'm going to say this phone number one more time. 702-399-0081 is the hotline. If you even remotely suspect a child or a youth is being trafficked in any way, you can call this number. It's not your job to be Columbo and figure it out. They will figure it out. You just call and say, hey, this is the kid that I suspect is in trouble. You can reach out to school administrators at your kids' schools. If there's something you suspect, they can follow up and move the needle. You can reach out to the RISE program.
Yes. I'm going to give our website just because our phone numbers and everything else is listed there. If you want to be a volunteer, you can also access that via the website. It's SOHLV, like Signs of Hope Las Vegas.org.
Okay, perfect. SOHLV.org.
And I'll give our website, and it has a contact form on there as well. And we do receive emails and stuff from parents or concerned neighbors, so don't feel like you're bothering us. It's the Embracing Project, all spelled out, .org.
The embracingproject.org. And tell us again about CASA. How do we get involved?
So they have a website, but I do not know it off the top of my head.
That's perfectly
so you'll have
fine.
to edit that part out because they will hate me.
We will refer you to a Google search.
Yes, you will. It is court-appointed special advocates run by the 8th Judicial District Court.
Okay. Court-appointed special advocates program. So lots of different ways people can get involved across the spectrum. Be kind to people, be kind to children. We're gonna make this work. We're gonna get it together. Thank you all for the work. You all are doing the heavy lifts, really, honestly. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing and the time that you're giving and the lives that you're changing. I'm grateful to have 3 fantastic people doing this work. So thank you. I know there are many more, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you for listening. We are grateful for your time. Please take this as the sign you've been looking for to get more involved in our community. We are only as good as we take care of our children. Have a great day.